Hello again, witches, seekers, and friends, and welcome to the Fat Feminist Witch Podcast, the show where we do a little ranting, raving, and wand-waving. I'm your host, Paige, and together we're going to explore magic and spirituality, social justice, the psychic realm, and most importantly, ourselves. Hey friends, and thanks for tuning into the Fat Feminist Witch Podcast today. This is episode 42, also known as Star Goddess. Today we'll be talking about asteroids in our solar system, and the goddesses and stories that they're named after, and therefore how to interpret them a little bit better in your birth chart. So I'm not just going to sit here and throw astrology and math at you, kind of like I've been doing for the last few episodes. Instead today, I thought it would be fun to share the stories behind the names of these asteroids in hope of injecting your astrological practice with a little bit of magic and mythology. I've also got some magic rocks for you, which are really neat. They're all either from outside of our atmosphere, they are extraterrestrial, or they offer us a connection to the heavens from here on Earth. Before I jump into the episode, I want to give a shout out to Nick and John at the Cannabis Act podcast for having me as a guest on their show. It wasn't a super witchy conversation, obviously. That's not what their podcast is about. But we do talk about podcasting itself and cannabis and being a self-employed creative person in our current economic climate. This podcast is local, though not all of our conversation is strictly local, of course. But I actually got to go to the studio that they recorded. It was so awesome. I record at home, right? You know, at my desk with my laptop and my microphone. I don't have to wear headphones. There's no one else here. I can be in my pajamas, all that stuff. But I actually had to get my ass dressed, and I even put on makeup and went down to the studio that they record in a really cool old part of town called Fort City, which was built around like 1900 by Henry Ford for the workers at the first auto plant here. I love history. You guys know I love history. So I like visiting the historical parts of my city. And then, of course, sitting in a studio like that, it was so much like a radio studio. You know, the microphones were on little arms coming up out of the table. I had headphones. There was a whole little table of knobs and dials that, you know, Nick obviously knew something about. Or he was faking it. Either way, I really appreciate it. So it was just, it was really neat because Windsor and Detroit are like the original home of really excellent FM radio. Like FM radio, especially rock and roll and Motown in its heyday, it all came from here. And that's part of the reason I always wanted to be on the radio when I was a teenager. And so ever since I was at the studio, I've had this like really badass feeling like, oh yeah, teenage me would be so psyched. So I guess I could check that off my bucket list. So thank you. The guys were really, really cool. They're really easy to talk with, and I had an awesome time on the podcast. So you can find the episode through iTunes or really any other podcasting service. And it's episode 39, which is so appropriately titled Witchy Woman and Other Don Henley Mistakes, which legit made me cackle out loud. You can also follow them on Twitter at the Cannabis Act. Super cool. So for the last 2 months, I've been learning about, and therefore podcasting about, astrology. And this is going to be the last episode in that little unofficial series, which I began in episode 39, The Psychology of Astrology. And for those who didn't know, yes, this is how I decide what topics to cover. I pick something I'm really interested in, and I start doing the research, and I develop a whole podcast idea out of that, just exploring the stuff about it that I find would be the most helpful and that I find to be the most interesting. So these last 2 months have been really great because I love space and I love the stars, and I love them both in magical ways and in very sciencey ways. And I learned a lot of really fun sciencey stuff about space too. So I follow a lot of NASA imaging experts on Twitter now. Like, I'm just so obsessed, and I'm constantly looking at pictures of the planets. Like, I drool over it like it's something I want to buy. Like, recently there's lots of pictures of the surface of Jupiter, and I'm so obsessed with these images. I just keep staring at it, and they're just swirls of like brown and beige and blue, but for some reason it's just, I can't stop looking at it. So I will no doubt be bringing up astrology and space still a lot going forth from here because I am obsessed. But otherwise, the topics for the next couple of months on the podcast here, we'll be shifting to psychic development in a more general sense. And that's starting next week with an interview with Mallory Kirsten, the Joy Goddess. She's an Akashic reader and teacher. So she comes on and she explains what the Akashic records are and how she got into them, how she got into reading them for other people, and why they're such an awesome tool for personal development and finding your life's purpose. It's a really, really neat interview. So that'll be next week, March 14th. And again, that is a Thursday. But for now, let's move on to our main topic today, which is the stars. I love stars. I love the sky in general. I love looking up at the night sky, especially. And that's because I'm human, and that's a human thing. Deities of the skies and of the heavens have always existed, like in every single culture. Spiritual culture, just regular culture. Even deities of the stars specifically, even specific deities of very specific stars are out there. It's really amazing once you start diving in. In ancient Egypt, the great goddess of the sky was Nut, and she arched over the whole of the earth, displaying the stars all over the front of her body. So you can picture her just arching herself over, looking down. And then at dusk, so during the day, the sun and the moon would make their way across her body of stars, and at dusk she would swallow them, and in the morning she would birth them again and start anew. Her body and her barrier of stars there also kept the forces of chaos and evil at bay, kept them separate from our earthly realm. So she had a protective job for the rest of us. In ancient Greece, Asteria was a Titan, so one of the original deities there, and she was a goddess of nocturnal oracles, which is like my new favorite. That would be my goth shop name. If I were to open like a really cool goth store that only sold witchy and like vampire type stuff, it would be called Nocturnal Oracles for sure. So Nocturnal Oracles are things like prophetic dreams and astrology. And she was also a goddess of things like falling stars and the stars in general. She was also a mother, and her daughter was Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft. And like other Greek goddesses, Asteria was just so fiercely pursued by Zeus. And Zeus is going to come up a lot throughout this episode because he's a prolific jackass. And she was just not feeling Zeus, as many other female-ish characters throughout Greek mythology were not. So she turned herself into a quail, and she flew right down into the sea, like she plummeted herself into the sea. And she became the island of Delos, which later provided refuge for her sister Leto to give birth to Artemis and Apollo, who are the twin deities of the moon and the sun, respectively, and are also the basis of the Gemini constellation and that sign. I love that connection. Everything's connected in Greek mythology. It's gross when you look into it too far, but it's pretty great. So the moon and the stars, they've always served as a guide for humans, and a literal light in the darkness. In modern years, the stars really still hold this power over witches in the quote-unquote new, and that sounds so odd to say, information about the Big Bang being the beginning of, at least this galaxy, is still inspiring celestial deities and mythology. The star goddess is the source of all creation in the modern American witchcraft tradition known as fairy, and that's spelled F-E-R-I. In the beginning, this deity was the primal darkness in just this vast void of space. She was both nothing and everything. The incredible darkness of space around her formed a mirror, and when she looked into it, all she could see was herself, and she was beautiful. The goddess was so taken with her image that she began to make love with herself, and from her joy came the stars and the planets, the Big Bang, and also the gods. And from those gods, the stars and planets, new worlds were all born. But it all started with this primordial blackness, and in the end, it will all return to the same. Matter is matter is all recycled all the time. This story is probably one of my favorite creation myths that I've ever heard, and it's a really fantastical image that I can actually bring up in my mind. It really captures the magic of space of space in general, and mythology too, because mythology always took a natural event or something that humans didn't really understand, and they applied a human personality to it to make sense of it. This story is probably one of my favorite creation myths that I've ever heard, and it's one that I can really imagine. It's such a cool image, and it really captures the magic of mythology so well for a modern story. You know, it takes a natural event, something that we don't quite completely understand, and applies human personality and personality, a soul to it. And I really like the way it happens in the Star Goddess story. I like that it's just herself, and from her everything else comes out. So there are a number of different ways to picture the Star Goddess, and you can find them all online, and I will definitely be putting links in the description, because the fairy tradition of Wicca is not something that I personally would practice, but it's a tradition that I find like endlessly beautiful. Like it's very artistic and colorful and wacky and weird in the best ways. And it also has a very open and decidedly queer vision of sexuality and sensuality, and like no shame. It's a really, really cool tradition that I highly recommend checking out. Even if it's not something you think you'll practice, there's lots of really cool stuff in there. But when I imagine the Star Goddess, you know, in my imagination, I just imagine a very large black or blue body covered in stars and surrounded by stars all over the place. And it's usually a female body, because that's what I look at. And as a fat woman, the emphasis on the goddess being very large and limitless is so cool. So cool. In the book that I first learned about the Star Goddess in, Evolutionary Witchcraft by T. Thorne Coyle, she says that the Star Goddess is also a reminder to allow ourselves to be whatever size is best for us. And that's like physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, all of that. It's to grow into our proper size, whatever that may be. And I love that. I love that. So most stories about gods and goddesses, they serve to teach us something, like a moral, you know, Aesop's Fables style, or to explain the way things work in the world. In astrology, and technically in astronomy, I guess, celestial bodies like planets and asteroids are named after deities from ancient Greek and Roman mythology. And in astrology, we use those names to assign meaning and personality to all of those planets and different things out there. Most of the planets in our solar system got their names so long ago, like all the planets from Mercury to Saturn. They got their names so long ago that when I really tried to find out if there was one person that you could credit with this idea, and I couldn't. You can't really find exactly who said, okay, let's call this one Venus. You can see that they've been talking about Venus forever, and retroactively we call it Venus each time. But yeah, it's a very old tradition. I'm gonna guess it originated in Greece, but I can't say that for sure. But this tradition was kept up, and now we have all of our planets, some dwarf planets, planetoids, moons, and asteroids, named after different characters and heroes and deities from Greek and Roman mythology. In astrology, along with those planets, certain asteroids can give us expanded info about very particular or specific parts of our personality, or, you know, if you want to look at it this way, our fate or destiny. Lilith has come up quite a bit because she rocks. And in the last episode, in episode 41, I mentioned Juno. We also have Chiron, Vesta, Pallas, and Ceres, and their stories can give us a little bit of insight into our fates and our psyches. Depending on which birth chart calculator you use, you might get all of these asteroids right in your report. And you might not. You might have to look them up separately. There are tons of different asteroids out there that have been given astrological meaning, but these ones really are the main ones. So let's start with Chiron. He's a big one. Chiron is also the lone gentleman of the group, and technically, I guess he's only half, because he's a centaur. He's half horse, half man. Chiron's birth was very, well, it's actually par for the course as far as Greek mythology goes, but it caused quite a stir, because he's the weird one, of course. Most centaurs were descended from an incredibly bizarre story about the son of Ares, who was so enamored with Zeus's wife, Hera, and he just refused to give up. So Zeus fashioned a fake Hera from clouds and let Ixion think he was making love with the real deal. The centaurs were born from this union. But that's not where Chiron came from. Chiron's parents were the Titan Kronos, also known as Saturn, and an ocean nymph. Kronos disguised himself as a horse at the time, so I guess that made Chiron a centaur. I'm sorry, that's so funny. I'm trying really hard not to laugh. Okay. Chiron wasn't a very funny guy. Chiron had a more serious and emotional demeanor than most of the centaurs, who were, they were wild. They were lusty and wild. They were half wild animal. And they were also born out of a really creepy and wild union. So Chiron was kind of the only one of his kind, and he felt kind of isolated and different from everyone else forever. And this gave him, a little bit more empathy. And because of his wisdom and his kindness, Chiron became the king of the centaurs, and he actually studied under Artemis and Apollo, our moon and sun, to become a spiritual teacher and priest, and was so revered at that point. Even the other centaurs who were nothing like Chiron really respected him, because he was doing something that they just didn't possess, but it gave them an opportunity to learn. Chiron also had a really wonderful gift for healing, and he could create medicines for any issue out of any plant. He knew all about secret plant magic. But one day, Chiron learned a pretty harsh lesson. He was accidentally cut by a poison-tipped arrow. He was visiting with Hercules, who had just killed the Hydra. And that poison, stayed in the wound on Chiron. And this is when he learned that his power of healing didn't apply to himself. Becoming the king of the centaurs and being half immortal, it meant that he wasn't going to die. He might die, but not for a long time. So he lived the rest of his life in serious pain, just nursing this wound. From that point on, Chiron had sacrificed worldly happiness, because you're never going to chill out again once you get a big, gross gash on your leg forever. So he'd sacrificed his worldly happiness and taught spiritual wisdom with even more vigor than he had before. And he became this archetype of the wounded healer. Through his pain and through his suffering, he was able to understand the pain and suffering of others and help them heal physically and spiritually. And that gave his difficult life purpose. In astronomy, so in actual space, Chiron is a celestial body that's orbiting between Saturn and Uranus. It's not technically an asteroid anymore. It's most likely like a comet or a piece of a comet, but it's been an asteroid, a centaur planet, a dwarf planet, you name it. It's just been everything. Asteroid is kind of just easier at this point. In astrology, it's known as our planet of healing and of karmic wounds. So it can shed light on wounds or issues that may challenge you throughout this lifetime, as well as how you can heal yourself by healing others. Very interesting. Ceres was the quintessential Earth Mother Goddess. I'm sure you can just picture exactly what I'm talking about. Some versions of the Empress in Tarot have Ceres on them. Actually, I was looking it up, and Ceres is on my copy of the Empress in one tarot deck, and Chiron is the part of the hierophant, which I think makes a lot of sense. So Ceres was the counterpart to Demeter in Greek mythology, the mother of Persephone. And we all know that wonderful, amazing story of Persephone. So Ceres, such Demeter, was the goddess of grains and agriculture and fertility. And she also presided over sacred law and the cycles of life and death. She was actually Chiron's half-sister. Her dad was also Kronos or Saturn, but her mother was Rhea, the Titan goddess of the earth. Ceres was the one who made wheat and grains, and she made all crops grow. She taught grain harvesting and making food from grain to a family who had been kind to her, who in turn taught other people. Cereal is named after Ceres. It's pretty cool. And after the introduction of grain foods, she became a very important goddess of food. So much so that people would maintain a small altar to her to bring in food in times of scarcity. One day, Ceres' daughter Proserpina, or Persephone, if you're Greek, was abducted by the god of the underworld, who was actually Ceres' brother, but we try not to think about that too much. Yikes. Yikes. Ceres, in her grief, refused to allow anything to grow. Crops withered and died, people were starving, everything was going to die without her nurturing influence. Finally, a bargain was struck, and she would have her daughter for half of the year. And that made her happy, and she allowed the world to flourish again. But every year, this cycle is repeated. And because Ceres could never accept even the little bit of loss of her daughter, she deals with this cycle of life and death over and over, and then so do we. Ceres, the asteroid or dwarf planet, depending again on who you ask or when they worked at NASA, is located in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Ceres was actually a planet at one time, a regular planet. In our charts, Ceres represents how we nurture others and gives us clues about what nurtures us specifically. And it can also shed light on issues of motherhood or your relationship with your parents and any sort of feelings of abandonment, independence, and attachment. So if you've ever had any issues with stuff like that, Ceres in your chart can point to that in both the sign and the house. I found looking up the house that these asteroids in gives you a great amount of information, so much more so than the sign, by the way. Ceres is one of them that's very specifically, the description in the sign was like, oh, okay, cool. And the description when I read the house was, oh my God. So, pretty important. Next we have Juno, also known as Hera in the Greek pantheon, who was the long-suffering queen to the king of the gods, Jupiter or Zeus, and his monstrous infidelity. It's just brutal. So she was the long-suffering queen to him and was also the goddess of marriage and the patron goddess of women. In Roman mythology, she is like beloved. They love Juno. She's the beloved servant to women during weddings and childbirth. She's there at all weddings. And she's also an advocate for the care of women. In Greek mythology, they took it a different way. And she's she's very petty and cruel and angry a lot about the many affairs of her husband. She tends to take it out on everyone but her husband most of the time, of course. Zeus frequently visited Earth to bed or full-on sexually assault various women, animals, and mythical creatures throughout the history of ancient Greece. In one particular instance, one particular out of many, Zeus tricked a woman, Alcmene, into sleeping with him by appearing as her husband, Amphitryon, who was away on, a quest. He was questing somewhere. And this happened so many. I don't know why men kept going on quests. This just happened every time, and especially in Greek mythology. But from this union, Hercules was born. We all know Hercules, half god with incredible strength. Kevin Sorbo. I loved Hercules. Zeus he loved Hercules. He was totally enamored with this little baby. He loved his strength. He was just the golden boy, right? And Hera was furious and jealous. So her vendetta against this tiny child for stealing the affections of her philandering husband, produced some of the most famous trials and travels and adventures of Greece's greatest mythical hero. Yikes. So you can definitely see how attitudes about women influenced Juno and the story of Juno specifically. So Juno the asteroid is located in the asteroid belt not far from her sister in Greek mythology, Ceres. In our charts, Juno tells us about marriage and fertility and fidelity. this dual nature of Juno's mythology, not only does it speak to patriarchal bullshit, but it shows the differences in relationships and marriages that are based on love and trust and stability, which are, Juno's thing, and one's based on lies and ruled by jealousy, which became Hera's thing, I guess. So Juno can indicate the kind of partnership that would serve you well, and maybe show you some of your own issues that could influence it in both negative and positive ways. So it can show you how to have Juno's stable relationship in life, even when she has to constantly forgive her husband, or, and you don't have to constantly forgive anybody, just remember that, or help prevent you from giving into your more Hera type impulses. Interesting. Next, we have Pallas, the asteroid, or Pallas Athena, also known just as Athena. She had so many names. Athena was the daughter of Zeus, and was another one with a pretty wacky birth. Pretty wacky. Hera wasn't her mother either. So Zeus had been warned by an oracle that having a child with the goddess of wisdom, who was his first love, I guess, would result in a child so powerful that it would overtake him. This was a pretty familiar story for Zeus, whose own father had tried to eat him over a very similar prophecy. I don't know why this kept happening. So he stuck with that old standby that his father had gone with and decided to eat. Decided to eat this problem away. And instead of eating the child like a sucker, he ate the entire pregnant goddess of wisdom. And so she was gone. Greek mythology is so weird. It's so fantastically weird. But shortly after this, Zeus developed the most painfully intolerable headache. It raged and raged, and his head was throbbing. Finally, Hephaestus the blacksmith got his gigantic axe and chopped Zeus's head straight open. And from that wound, Athena emerged fully formed, letting loose an epic battle cry that I imagine sounded like Xena. And it's the only sound I can hear when I hear this story. It's Xena every time. All the gods and immortals in attendance were stunned, because this happened right on Olympus. Like, they were all just chilling. And Zeus was so proud, because it was a really incredible entrance. She just made a really great first impression. I joke a lot about Athena, because she was kind of a feminist nightmare sometimes. She seemed to like men more than women, but she was a very interesting goddess. Athena became the new goddess that was associated with wisdom, as well as justice and war and battle. She was really intelligent and fair-minded. She was also chaste by choice, and rarely acted out of emotion, and instead, favored logic and trying to figure things out with her mind. Athens was named after her, and she served as its patron goddess forever, and thus the patron goddess of metropolitan cities and city life, and justice, juries, the court system. In Sparta, not super far away, but in a very different culture, her warlike proclivities and her fierceness in battle, and that story about the coming out of his brain with a battle cry, she was very, very loved, and she was worshipped right alongside Ares, the god of war, who was their patron. Where Ares presided over the physical act of war and battle and bloodshed and reacting out of emotion and all that kind of sexy stuff about fighting. So I saw someone say that online, and I really laughed, because Ares, or Mars, is very much associated with sexuality as well as war and battle and bloodshed. Athena was the cool-headed hand of justice, and the drive for everyone to fight for a cause and to care about things. She was also proof of the power of women. So Spartan women, and I don't know why so many people don't know this, but in ancient Greece, women were not treated like people. Like in Athens, this incredibly advanced society where, politics was born, women were essentially just vaginas. They had to wear togas so huge and drapey and gigantic. They were never allowed to be seen in the nude. It was just, they didn't have a lot of rights at all. They weren't people. But Spartan women were some of the few in ancient Greece who were seen to have kind of like an equal role with their male counterparts. So their role in Spartan society, which was to raise strong Spartan men and keep good Spartan homes and, to run the business and all of that while men were away at war doing their part of their role in society, it was seen as important. If the women weren't there to have children, first of all, there'd be no children. And if the women were weak and couldn't fight for themselves, couldn't stand up for themselves, couldn't run the business, couldn't run the home, how were they expected to raise strong children? So their roles in society were seen as complementary. And that was very unusual back then. It's really actually neat. Really neat. Sparta is a very cool thing to read about. So Pallas, the asteroid, is in the asteroid belt again, and it shows you how you use your intellect and your logic to solve problems. It can also shed light on things like how you interact with the men in your life or with your own feminine side, and with your father. So it can say a little bit about that relationship specifically and your feelings about justice and personal power and the law. So that one's really interesting, especially how you solve problems. It really is uncanny how correct my Pallas sign was with how I personally attack problems. And it also pointed out, the things I do that work and the things I do that kind of get in my own way in situations where I'm trying to solve problems. Really neat. Next we have Vesta. Vesta was the Roman goddess of the home and hearth. In ancient Greece, her name was, I don't remember, Hestia. So she was the goddess of the home and hearth, and a sacred fire in her honor was kept burning constantly in a lot of homes and temples throughout Rome. She was another goddess that was chaste by choice, and priestesses to Vesta were called Vestals or Vestal Virgins, which is, you might have heard that expression before. This is what the Vestal Virgins are. Before puberty, so between 6 to 10, if a girl was accepted into the order, her parents, her father especially, would relinquish parental rights to his daughter, and she would become a ward of this priestesshood. She would sign an oath of chastity for 30 years, and in that time she would serve the goddess Vesta by tending the fire as well as presiding over some state business. So at trials, the word of Vestals was considered credible every time. They didn't have to take an oath. And they could even free prisoners and people condemned to die with their touch. So if a Vestal Virgin was in the town square when someone was being taken out to an execution, and they made eye contact or the Vestal touched him, he instantly was pardoned. Really interesting. They were given a high status. And after their 30 years was done, they could continue if they wanted, I guess. But new Vestals would be brought in, and they were permitted to get married. They were taken care of for life, and their husbands were seen as, it was a great honor to marry someone who had previously served as a Vestal Virgin. Which is weird and interesting all at the same time. But this whole part about the Vestal Virgins, this made Vesta an important symbol and goddess of sisterhood, both with our familiar sisters, our DNA sisters, and the sisters that we choose in life, especially priestesses. So priestesses, nuns, all of those type sisterhoods, definitely under the care of Vesta, but our own relationship with our sisters as well. And in astrology, Vesta can mean a million different things. It's every time you look up Vesta, you're going to find something else. So it can shed light on how you commit to a cause that's important to you and how you express dedication. Vesta can tell you a little bit about home, like what feels like home, what keeps your hearth fire burning. So what is it that keeps you stable? And Vesta can speak a little to sexuality and to gender roles. Vestal Virgins had an interesting place with their gender role because they were treated as higher than women because they didn't have any intercourse with men, and any men who touched a Vestal Virgin when he wasn't supposed to was I mean, there was a million things. You could be thrown into the ocean. You could be castrated. You could just be murdered. All of this. But Vesta herself and all of her priestesses kind of eschewed the gender roles a little bit. So Vesta can speak a little bit about that as well. It's kind of very, I don't know, it's like our primitive security with Vesta. So the things that are important to you, the things that you dedicate your life to, your home and where you belong, and your own sensuality and sexuality and how you express your humanity there. Like I said, that one is a lot, but it's very interesting. So our final goddess is Lilith, and I saved her for last because she's not a Greek goddess. She's actually much, much, much older than Greek goddesses. Lilith is, depending on who you talk to, a goddess or demoness from ancient Babylonian myth, like from the very beginning. Lilith's story has changed and transformed a lot over time, but the essence of who she is and what she stands for has pretty much stayed the same. Years and years later, Hebrew mythology and mysticism, which again is full of incredibly amazing stories, gave Lilith a very important and kind of infamous role in the story of humanity, and that was as Adam's first wife. So we all know the story of Adam and Eve. Eve was made from Adam's rib, and then she ate the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge and got everyone expelled from the wonderful garden, from Eden. And according to this Hebrew legend, before there was Eve, Adam was paired with Lilith. And God had made Lilith in exactly the same way he'd made Adam, from scratch, from the same ball of clay. And at first everything was great. But Lilith began to upset the harmony and balance of utopia by asking questions she shouldn't ask and demanding things that she thought she had a right to. The straw that really broke the camel's back with Lilith and God, I guess, was when Lilith demanded of Adam that sex be as satisfying for her as it was for him. I guess missionary position just was not cutting it. And that's real. The biggest problem was missionary position. This was a blasphemous action, of course. And Lilith was cast out of the garden unless she agreed to fully submit to Adam. Of course, she didn't do that. I like to imagine that she was the first person to tell men to fuck off. I hope so. Of course, outside of the Garden of Eden, there were no other humans. They had been the first ones. The only creatures that existed were some animals and then demons and angels, God's other creatures. So she learned magic and she learned to exist in the barren darkness. She became the mother of demons and she banged archangels and she became immortal. She became over time a demoness or a vampire or a succubus or a baby snatcher, again, depending on who you ask. According to some stories, and these are my favorite stories, sometime later, once Lilith had been made to suffer a good long time, she returned to the Garden of Eden to kind of, just see what was going on. And she saw Eve. And Eve had been created from just a tiny piece of Adam. She wasn't, right away, it was made to show that Eve was not as equal to Adam as Lilith had been. And that was because when you made Lilith equal, she demanded equality. I guess that was a mistake. I guess. So she saw Eve, who, was kind of only part of her own person, but she saw her checking out that tree of knowledge. And she saw the first inklings of, rebellion and independent thought. And probably sisterhood, I gotta get this girl out of here. So she transformed into a snake, entered the garden, and told Eve the wonders of knowledge and wisdom and independence and convinced her to take that bite that got everybody exiled from the Garden of Eden. Wild, right? And it's all women's fault, I guess. Not even just one woman. It's got to be multiple women now. Lilith was also associated with unexplained deaths and disappearances of babies. She was kind of that kind of demon. So she was also in charge of women who got abortions and homosexuals and other sexual deviants. And these were all obviously very negative things at the time. She was supposed to scare people. You don't want to be like Lilith and, if you get an abortion or are a homosexual, or you don't want to submit to your husband, you are Lilith and you are this demoness. But in recent years, the virtues of Lilith are a lot more visible thanks to the interpretation of her story through a feminist lens. Lilith is the bomb, quite frankly. There's a reason she is so popular, and it's because her story is so relatable, so completely relatable. So in astrology, and again, I've mentioned Lilith a bunch of times, so go back through the next 3 episodes about that, and you'll hear a little bit more about Lilith. But in astrology, you might find reference to different Liliths that appear in your chart. So there's Lilith the asteroid, black moon Lilith, dark moon Lilith, and it's endlessly confusing. It's just the worst. But I have good news. I was really confused too, and I've thoroughly researched it, and I'm telling you, they're all the same. So, for all intents and purposes, there's just one Lilith. And if you use any astrological calculators to come up with your Lilith sign, whether it's telling you your asteroid, your black moon, or your dark moon, it's going to come up the same sign. So it's all one. It's one. So our Lilith signs shed light on some of the dark and hidden aspects of our personality. Sometimes it's described as a look at our shadow self. Examining Lilith can shed light on darkness or sexuality, independence, and kind of expose the virtues of those things, even if they don't seem positive. It can also explain ways that you feel alienated by society, or some of the ways that you don't go with the status quo. Some things, unconventional things that you need in your life to be your best person. Hopefully the stories of these goddesses give you a little bit more insight into what these asteroids mean within your birth chart, and also give you some inspiration for, some of the lessons that you can take from these goddesses and their connections to all of us, and especially for women and for those who don't quite fit in with anyone. Anyone. Chiron didn't fit in with his fellow centaurs because he was just born differently. Athena, she didn't really get along with other women because of the way that she was born and reared and the early influences in her life. Juno done struggled. She struggled the whole time. And even within the myth and the difference between the myths of Juno and Hera, we can kind of see the ways that women have to fight about that. And then again, Vesta is, there's just a lot to unpack there. and finally Lilith, who is kind of the ultimate. Like, I would be so psyched to be known as the goddess of, pro-choice homosexuals and sexual deviants. I'm there. I'm all about it. I get a lot of inspiration from goddesses, even though I'm not, I don't practice with deities. I don't worship deities, but I love stories. Aesop's Fables was my shit growing up. I love morality tales, and I've always loved reading mythology and reading about these kind of infamous figures through history that just speak to certain elements of the human experience, right? And can help guide us. It's just super fun. So I hope you guys enjoyed those stories. To continue our very starry vibe, I have got some magic rocks for you. No sketchy herbs, because as far as I can tell, no sketchy herbs grow in space. None of them grow in space. I do have a profile on borage, which is a star-shaped flower that you can use in star magic, and you can find that on my website at thefatfeministwitch.com. You can also find my post called Magic Rocks from Outer Space, which we are going to talk about right now. I love crystals. You guys know that. I love crystals. I love rocks. I even love, non-crystal-y rocks that I find at the beach. I'm all about it. I like looking at these crystals and thinking, wow, this is so weird. This grows out of the ground just all over the place, just like grass. You know what I mean? And it's such a great reminder that we are so, so young in the history of the universe. And those crystals are so old. They were here before any of us. And it's one of my favorite methods of working with earth magic. It makes me feel really connected to the ground because that's where they grow up out of. But sometimes I want to do some magic that's not very earthly. I want to do some spacey extraterrestrial magic. Really fun. And luckily, there are some crystals and stones to do that. So, for those who don't know how the universe was created, it was basically just a gigantic explosion, and everything that's left didn't look like this at the beginning. We've all been bumping into each other and breaking chunks off of all of these other different rocks and gassy balls around us. The moon, our beautiful moon, one of the very first deities recognized by humankind, is really just a big chunk of rock that originated on the rock that became Earth, billions and billions of years ago. All of it's connected. So as far as I'm concerned, space magic is Earth magic. Space is just an extension of Earth. It connects us to all the different things that came about when Earth did. So some of the stones and crystals I've got are literally the product of a collision with cosmic material from outside of our atmosphere and our own planet. These are really great because they can help us with a direct connection to stars, planets, and, if you're willing, extraterrestrial life forms. And they radiate powerful energy for healing and for magic. Some of the magic rocks I have are entirely earthly, but they're very clear reminders, that we're all made of star stuff. I love that line. I love it. So first we have meteorite. And yes, literally, meteorite, pieces of meteorite. So meteorites are stones that they originate from outer space. They're pieces of comets and different debris from the asteroid belt between us, or between Mars and Jupiter. Meteorites are usually classified by the elemental and metal makeup of the stone, but most are magnetic and contain nickel and iron, just like the Earth's core. They're a very interesting feeling stone. So meteorite works with your crown, third eye, root, and solar plexus chakra, almost all of them. It's very good for grounding in that way. It kind of connects the chakras. It's associated with the planet Uranus, which is about rebellion and shaking up. It's also a very intelligent planet. Likewise, in the zodiac, it's associated with Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus, and Scorpio. It's associated with fire and earth because that's literally how it's made. It burns up on re-entry and hits the earth. So you can use it for grounding, protection, alien communication, cryptozoology, which, yes, is exploring possibly mythical animals, intuition and clairvoyance. It can bring you hope if you live with chronic pain or chronic illness. It's good for endurance, resilience, helping find your life purpose, prosperity, transformation, healing, and of course can help with astrology and any other exploration into things related to space and the cosmos. So meteorite's been sacred forever, just forever. The black stone at Mecca is actually a meteorite that was supposedly sent to Earth from heaven to show Adam and Eve where to build the first temple once they were cast out of the garden there. It's an interesting grounding stone because it feels like it's got you safely tethered to the earth, but with the ability to explore the cosmos above. It's a really interesting feeling. It can open the third eye and crown chakras so that you can get messages from spirit guides, ghosts, deities, and even extraterrestrial beings. And yes, again, I mean aliens. I'm not talking to aliens personally, but lots of people do. And there are lots of really cool people out there that work with extraterrestrial beings in their magical practice. So, in general, meteorite helps us discover or remember our purpose here on Earth. So if you're searching for where you belong, or if you feel yourself thinking there's no point in you being on this planet, meteorite might offer a little spiritual assistance and comfort. It's also very well acquainted with swift and scary change because of how it comes here. So it can help you navigate serious changes and, survive the burn up on re-entry. Next we have tektite, which I'm actually holding in my hand right now as a nice little piece of tektite. Tektite is glass. Technically, it's a natural glass. It's formed during the impact of a meteorite with the Earth. So when the meteorite hits the Earth, tektite is produced and then flung around the area all around the meteorite. This is called the strewn field, and you can only find tektites in the craters and strewn fields of these meteorite landing zones. It looks a lot like meteorite in that it is black. It is glassy. Meteorite's a little bit more metally, but it's black. It's glassy, and it has a very impacted outer shell. There's lots of spaces where you can see that it landed on dirt or sticks or something while it was still hot and still forming. It works with all of your chakras. It's associated with Jupiter and Pluto, and in the zodiac, Aries and Sagittarius as well, and is a fire element stone, very, very fiery. So it can help induce telepathy, divine protection, again, alien communication. You can use it to work star magic. Anytime you're going through transformation or manifestation, trying to find your life's purpose, again, can help with all of that. Clairaudience and communication with deities, dream magic, lucid dreaming, all of that is also in the realm of tektite's natural powers. This is because it's an awesome stone for communication. It's a communication stone, whether the communication be between living beings on the earth or not. So if you suspect you have clairaudient abilities or are working on developing or trying to harness those, I honestly can't recommend the tektite knife. And it's also really good for dream work, like I said, since this is also a form of spiritual communication. It can help you have more psychic dreams, remember them clearly, and help you get into that sweet spot for lucid dreaming. My piece that I'm holding, I love it. It's so small. It just fits on the first digit of my thumb, basically. But it packs a really powerful punch. I don't always physically feel something when I touch crystals. I actually usually don't feel something when I touch crystals, but I do with tektite. This is one of them. The arm I'm currently holding it in, which is my left arm, it feels like it's vibrating. And that feeling goes from my hand, like just straight up all the way to the top of my head. I also feel tingling in my ears, and sometimes if I'm holding it for too long, my ears will pop, which is really weird. Really, really weird. But it's a great stone for communication, right? Maybe that's part of the opening up process. Like meteorite, like all of these space rocks, actually, it's another stone that helps you discover or truly live your life's purpose, and is especially really great at reminding you to take care of yourself, and that is a part of your life's purpose. In the Complete Crystal Handbook by Cassandra Eason, which I highly recommend, by the way, she offers affirmations for all of the crystals, and the one for tektite is, I must meet my own needs to truly love others. And that's a really great way to sum up the energy of tektite. Next, we have Libyan Desert Glass. This is another glass. It's a really nice golden color. It resonates with your solar plexus and your heart. It's ruled by the sun and with the sign of Aries, and it's a fire and air element stone. It's used for expansion, compassion, enlightenment, accessing the Akashic records and past lives. It can also, again, help you with grounding and lots of different psychic energy, like clairsentience, which is psychic feeling, claircognizance, which is psychic knowing, and having a strong life force, power, and dynamic royalty. Very, very masterful stone. So Libyan desert glass, what it is, to the best of our knowledge, is a tektite, but it's only found in this really particularly bleak section of the Sahara Desert, known as the Great Sand Sea. I'll give you 2 guesses what the Great Sand Sea is known for. This area is right on the border between modern Egypt and Libya. So if someone tries to sell you this Libyan desert glass and it comes from anywhere else, they're lying to you. So though the people, obviously, that live in that area have known about using the glass forever, the rest of us just got on their level in the 1930s. This is around the time when Egyptian, exploring Egyptian tombs and the love of all Egyptian aesthetic was very, very popular in the West here. But as far as they can tell, Libyan desert glass was all formed more than 28 million years ago from a very serious impact with a meteorite in the sand, obviously. This stone, like I said, has been around a very long time, and it was so revered by the ancient Egyptians that when they were, digging through King Tut's sarcophagus, which was probably not a good idea, but Tutankhamun had an amulet in his sarcophagus of a scarab, a stone scarab. And he was wearing it right over his heart. And this is such a really great poetic example of how Libyan desert glass is used. And it's said to contain the energy of the golden ray, or the sun itself. Egyptian pharaohs were believed to be direct descendants of the gods, right? Especially the sun god Ra, who was like, the Jesus of ancient Egypt. It's a very similar story. So not only was the ancient glass a revered symbol of that area and of this magical solar lineage, but it was thought to offer Tut power in the afterlife so that he would still have the sunlight on his side when he goes into the darkness. So beautiful. I love it. Ancient Egypt worked with a lot of crystals, actually. I could do a whole episode about a lot of the crystals that we still use today that featured in ancient Egypt, and I actually might. I just got that idea now. I'm going to write this down. Sorry. Okay. Oh, embarrassing. So Libyan desert glass, it resonates with your solar plexus chakra in a really, really extreme way. This is the best crystal to go for if you feel like that chakra is blocked or is not functioning at its peak energy. Your solar plexus is in charge of your life force, or your prana, and generates the energy needed to help you reach your goals and ambitions, or even have goals and ambitions. It's also the seat of your intuition, so it can help you strengthen that intuition, those gut feelings, and any psychic powers that come from the same place, like the psychic feeling and psychic knowing. When it comes to exploring past lives or your Akashic records, this stone is amazing. It will increase your desire to continue to learn more. And it really, for anyone, it really encourages you to learn more about far-off worlds or ancient cultures or even like extraterrestrial societies out there. It very much gives you that curiosity about everything else around you. It's very protective, especially when worn over the heart or the solar plexus for long stretches of time. It's part of the reason they put the desert glass right over Tutankhamun's heart, was that protective and powerful vibe. So not only will it help you explore your past lives, it can help you heal some of the karmic wounds that you find there, even the ones beyond yourself. It can be used to heal entire families of karmic trauma and wounds. So very cool. That's a good one if you're working with Chiron. This is a really great stone to combine with any sort of work you do with your Chiron asteroid. Moldavite is the star when it comes to magic rocks from outer space. It's everyone's favorite, and it's because it deserves it. So cool. It's like glass bottle green. It's an incredible color. This is another tektite, a glass. But this one specifically was formed around 15 million years ago around Germany and the Czech Republic, kind of in an area that spans all of them. And again, the strewn field around that collision was very large. So lots of moldavite spread out quite far throughout both these countries. And it's long been used as a spiritual stone. They also used it for actual tools and spiritual carvings and stuff. When the Venus of Willendorf, that first goddess statue, was discovered, they found that she had actually been buried with lots of talismans and knives and jewelry and other little carvings, all made from moldavite. And that was 25,000 years ago. That's how long moldavite's been popular. And when it comes to spiritual and psychic development, this is the one people are going to recommend to you every single time. And it's because it is a really interesting stone. This is another one that could make your arm vibrate or even get very warm. A lot of people, I find, they feel heat coming from it. And I find anyone who's struggling to get into a good meditative state, if you hold just a little piece of moldavite, out you go. The energy also gets a little more potent over time. So moldavite works with all of your chakras, but especially your heart, your third eye, and your crown. It's associated with a lot of different planets. Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, all of those outer planets that are newer in our knowledge of space and time and kind of control some of the more esoteric bits of her personality. It's associated with Aquarius and Scorpio. And the elements most associated with it are spirit, which is spirituality, water, and fire. So you can use it for gaining power. For healing, it's a great healer for physical and emotional and spiritual healing. It's great for transformation, protection, disconnecting from unhealthy attachments. A lot of people recommend it if you're going through anything dealing with addictions. It can help you break unhealthy habits. It's great for dream magic and lucid dreaming, astral travel, again, your clairsentience, your animal communication, attracting and communicating with spiritual beings. And it's really great at illuminating secrets, so it's a good one to work with when you're doing any sort of shadow work. It's a really intuitive healer, and moldavite can heal even when you don't exactly know what's wrong. It can help you figure out what the problem is and even help you find a solution. And this effect is really great. Financial worries. A lot of people say this. Moldavite's kind of expensive, so it seems like an odd stone to recommend for financial issues. But when you're worried about finances, you're not actually worried about money, right? That's your survival instinct. That's your stability. That's what allows you to live on this planet. So that is a very serious issue. And when financial stuff is going very wrong, the level of stress that you can have over that is like, this is what causes ulcers and stuff. You know what I'm saying? It can kill you. So moldavite is really good at helping ease those fears and help you find new solutions that you might never have considered before. And then even grant that creative energy to actually put those solutions into action. It cleanses your aura, it aligns your chakras, and it helps you connect to everything. At work, it's really good for counteracting cynicism. Really good. And if you ever feel like, if you ever feel like the world just isn't that fun and wonderful as you always imagined, moldavite can help you bring that feeling back. Help you rediscover magic if you felt disconnected from it or jaded. It's another one that can help you discover your true purpose in life. All of these stones that, come from space and end up here, they all help you find the reason why you're here on this planet. Because I'm sure that's a question all those rocks, if they have sentient thought, I'm sure that's what they're wondering. There's also a very strong connection between moldavite and water. Water signs love moldavite, Scorpio especially, and moldavite. It's like peanut butter and crackers. So I think it's because it helps us navigate. Did I say peanut butter and crackers? That's really weird. I definitely meant peanut butter and jelly. Weird. I think the episode might be going on a little long. So, moldavite's got a very deep, serious kind of vibe, like the ocean depths. That's very Scorpio. So, it really works for that, helping us navigate rocky emotions and rocky seas. It also makes it great for crystal elixirs and magical baths. So it's safe to put a moldavite, as long as it's a real moldavite, make sure you know, into a glass of water or into your bath while you're sitting in it so you can absorb its energies that way. I also find with the drinking, some people who really react to crystals physically, if they feel that heat, it can get kind of bad. And I find that drinking the water instead of touching the stone, you know, it cools off. It cools that vibe off. So people who are very sensitive to that, that's a great way to work a little bit with moldavite. Aren't those neat? I get so geeked out when I go to my crystal shop and she has got new meteorites or tektites or whatever. And I just can't believe how amazing it is to hold a little piece of outer space, something that was outside of our atmosphere in my hand. I think that's part of the reason why, you know, tektites and moldavites, these space crystals, when I hold them, I really genuinely feel something. And I think it's just because of that connection, that direct connection to the cosmos. So those are the crystals that you can find. Crystals, none of them are really crystal, which is great. But those are the crystals, the stones, the magic rocks that you can find that come directly from outer space or that originate in outer space. But there are a lot of crystals that grow here just straight out the ground. And they connect us to space or stars or some of the heavenly bodies up there. Really obvious example is moonstone. Moonstone is a favorite with witches, and it connects us to the moon, specifically the full moon. So it works with our sacral chakra, which is very watery and psychic. And then our brow and crown chakras. It's associated with the moon, obviously, and water and the sign of Cancer. So the moonstone is really great for health and healing, helps us remain calm. It brings in that full moon energy. It's good for sleep and easing nightmares. Opens your heart chakra, safe travel, especially over water, and reproductive health and strength, pregnancy, periods, all of that. It's super popular, and for whatever reason, sunstone, its counterpart, is like criminally unpopular. So, so there is also a sunstone, and this works a lot like moonstone with your root in your solar plexus. It's associated with the sun, with fire, and with the sign of Leo. And this one, it still works with healing and opening your chakras. But where the moon is very watery and very calm and very emotional, the sunstone is very much about, you know, energy and passion and sexuality and success. It's also associated with childhood and whimsy and joy and warmth, you know, all of that fun, sunny stuff. Like I said, sexuality, sensuality, and your lower chakras can all be aided with sunstone. And likewise, because those lower chakras rule this stuff, it can help with confidence and self-worth and fame, good luck, independence, creativity, all that stuff to make your life very sunny and excited. When it comes to humans in the cosmos, I mean, there's no bigger players than the sun and the moon, right? It's a good place to start. Most people wouldn't think of these as space rocks, but I do. So, like I said, moonstone is very, very popular. Sunstone is made almost the same way, but it doesn't have rainbow glimmer like a lot of moonstones do. So if you love your moonstone, I highly recommend getting a sunstone. I love to work with them together because, you know, they're two sides of the same coin. They invoke balance and emotional stability. They give you energy as well as keeping you calm so that you use it in a proper way. They're really great in love magic and they attract love and sexuality. Empress Cortana on Instagram told me to use sunstone and rose quartz together, and you can actually attract a lover who meets your needs sexually. So that's a really, really neat tip about the sunstone, and I was very excited to see someone else uses it. Next is galaxyite. Galaxyite I am obsessed with and have been posting about a lot. Galaxyite is so called because it looks like a small, dark, black and green and blue galaxy in your hand. It's like a variety of labradorite, so it's got that same kind of shine. It works with your crown chakra. It's associated with Neptune, earth and water elements. And it's your ultimate aura cleanser, you know? So it cleanses and repairs your aura. It helps increase psychic powers. It helps facilitate spiritual growth. It connects you to stars and to the cosmic realm. Any sort of other spiritual realms, you know, galactic realms and fairy realms and ghost realms and any of the realms you might want to visit. It helps ease anxiety and eases the pain of isolation and loneliness specifically. It's good for astral travel, new moon magic, grounding, balance. It's just all around really, really great. I've actually written about and talked about Galaxy 8 before. Again, you can find that on my website. It's got just a really, really awesome vibe. I use it a lot for healing and cleaning aura, aligning the chakras, and that calmness, I definitely feel that. I have a palm stone. It's in my palm right now. So my palm stone fits right in there. And whenever I'm really just freaking out, or I'm having a really bad depressive episode and it's making me feel like, oh my God, why am I here? Galaxyite makes me feel very safe and connected and helps me calm down. I will straight up fall asleep with this thing in my hand because it makes me feel so great. And finally, we have blue goldstone. Again, this one is here because it looks like a blue field of stars, a sky full of stars. It's a beautiful starry crystal. It is not a natural crystal. This one is handmade. And it's copper and glass, essentially. So it's really, really pretty and it's beautiful. And people will always say, you know, this isn't natural. I don't care. It's beautiful and it's got great energy. So it's associated with all your upper chakras, throat, third eye, crown, Jupiter and Venus, the elements of fire and spirit as well, and the Sagittarius sign. So it's really good for fame and fortune and self-expression and communication, artistry, really fun stuff. It also protects against psychic attacks and, again, helps with spiritual communication, so telepathy and speaking with other spiritual beings. It can increase your empathic power and offer good luck and energy. And it's one of my favorites for wishing. I also include it as an image of stars, specifically, and starry nights whenever I'm doing work with that kind of energy. So, even if we don't know it, our connection to our universe and our galaxy and all these planets and stars, which was all born out of this single wild explosion, this is one of the greatest powers we have access to. And when we connect with outer space and our stars, we're connecting to ancient history and to, you know, the core of the human experience and different parts of ourselves. And that's what I love so much about astrology and working with, you know, crystals from outer space, or working with the images of the planets, of the asteroids, and honoring that connection that we have between not only, you know, the physical matter, the physical matter of the galaxy, but also in general, how important of a part our place in the galaxy has played in the whole of human history. Thank you so much for tuning into the Fat Feminist Witch today. If you would like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/thefatfeministwitch and join the Witch and Bitch for $10 a month. It's a private membership group where we do live meetups and we read books together, and I solidify a lot of the topics that I'm going to talk about on the podcast through my work with the Witch and Bitch. And it's really fun. You can also go to advertisecast.com if you have a witchy business or practice that you would like to advertise. If you are a psychic, if you read astrology, if you have written a book or you make candles and you would like to advertise on the Fat Feminist Witch, let me know. You can also go to my website, thefatfeministwitch.com, and buy me a coffee to make a small little one-time donation that really truly makes a difference, I promise, no matter how much. I hope you all had a really wonderful new moon last night and that you're having a really great Pisces season. We've come up into Mercury retrograde now, which might be a little bit difficult, but it's a really great time of growth and of growing. So I hope today's topic gives you kind of a starting point of how you can explore yourself and explore your inner world. Pisces is the sign of illusions and dreams, so pay attention to dreams and pay attention to memories and explore a little bit of the depths of your own soul with the help of some of these asteroid gods and goddesses and magic rocks from outer space. All right, have an excellent weekend, everybody, and tune in next week when I interview Mallory Kirsten, the Joy Goddess, about the Akashic Records and learn how to dive into your own records and past lives.